Hello, everyone. My name is EJ Blair, and I've been so thankful to serve as one of your class marshals this year. This afternoon, it's my honor to introduce our first orator. Many of us know this economics concentrator and Courier House resident as the budding filmmaker who produced the award-winning documentary titled The West, or as president of the Harvard Black Men's Forum and writer of The Lampoon, or as CEO of that not-so-successful recording label. I know him as the guy whose diet consists entirely of honey buns and Felipes, and as the guy who let his pet snake wander the halls of Courier for 2 weeks without ever telling his blockmates that it escaped the cage. But we also know him as the guy from humble beginnings who now has his dream job on Wall Street. Congrats on 2+2, bro. Don't forget about us when you're crashing world economies. Having started from the bottom and now here to deliver the Harvard Male oration titled Eventually is my blockmate and dearest friend, Damilare Sonoiki.
Thank you, Everton. I look forward to crashing world economies. Good afternoon, 2013. Good afternoon, 2013. This has been a sad year for Harvard. We got bounced out of the NCAA tournament after just one win. Our endowment is a mere $36 billion, and we have to settle for some random commencement speaker tomorrow, Oprah. But today is about 2013. I'm impressed when I think about the wide range of things our classmates will be doing next year, like working at Goldman Sachs in New York, or working at Goldman Sachs in Boston. All jokes aside, I am honored to speak to you today. I grew up in Southwest Houston, where sirens and gunshots were as common as they were in Cambridge just last month. Through the A Better Chance program, I attended a boarding school in Virginia, Woodbury Forest. When I told our headmaster, Dr. Dennis Campbell, that I had decided to attend Harvard, the first thing he told me was I had to attend one of Reverend Gomes' sermons at Memorial Church. When I got to Harvard, many other people, religious and not religious, told me the same thing. I had to hear Reverend Gomes speak at Memorial Church, and I had to go to one of his afternoon teas. These things were on my Harvard bucket list, right up there with running Primal Scream, peeing on the John Harvard statue, and that other thing. Freshman fall, I bumped into Reverend Gomes just over there by Canada, and I told him that I would make sure to come to one of his teas and to one of his sermons. That fall, I experienced the shock that we all experience at Harvard. The shock of transitioning from being the kid who graduated top of the class, who was president of every silly resume-padding high school organization, who was the hometown hero, to being one of 6,400 people who all did that. I reacted to that shock the way most of us did. I comped the Crimson. It was pretty boring. Like many, I signed up for every extracurricular and stretched myself thin. Still, hearing Reverend Gomes speak and going to one of his teas remained in the back of my mind. There were things I was going to do eventually. After I finished that problem set, that Crimson News article, that Lampoon comp piece, the reading for section, back when I read for section. Eventually. That December 2010, Reverend Gomes suffered a stroke. When I heard the news, I felt concern for Reverend Gomes and his loved ones, and I also felt a sense of urgency. I had to go to Memorial Church to hear him speak, and I had to go to one of his afternoon teas. I promised myself I would do both, eventually. For months, problem sets, readings, and meetings got in the way, but still, I promised myself that I would go. On March 1st, 2011, I woke to an email from President Faust. The subject line was Peter Gomes' announcement. It read, "Dear members of the Harvard community, it is with immense sadness that I write today to share the news of the passing of the Reverend Professor Peter J. Gomes. Reverend Gomes died last night from complications arising from a stroke. At Harvard, there's a pervading culture of eventually. The senior survey is just one example of this culture. According to the survey, many of us wish to be working in fields very different than the ones we're about to answer. Family needs and relationships can cause one to enter a field that one's not truly passionate about. But the discrepancy between where we are working and where we wish we were working seems too large to be explained by those factors alone. I think our fascination with eventually is the cause of this discrepancy. We want to do this 2-year program and then that fellowship and then that other 2-year program, and then eventually we'll do what it is we want to do. But eventually isn't promised. Options become distractions, 2 years become 20 years, and eventually becomes never. Home reminds me of how easily eventually can become never. In 6th grade, my house was shot in a drive-by. For months afterward, every time a car drove by at night, my mom would go to the window and watch in fear. Sophomore year, my cousin was shot and killed. He was 22. And when I was 16, I got shot accidentally by a friend. After I left the hospital that night, after watching my mom cry, my friend's mom cry, my other friend's mom cry, you know, moms, I looked down and noticed 2 bullet holes in my shirt. These holes remind me that eventually isn't promised. In March, I was working on a take-home midterm. Like I always do when trying to be productive, I ended up on YouTube watching Drake videos with my blockmates. Started from the bottom, now we're here. I also found a video of a performance by Leonard Cohen. Describing the moment he wrote the lyrics, Cohen said, "I think I was sitting at a bar in a Polynesian restaurant in Miami Beach. I don't know what I was doing there. I have no program. I have no 5-year plan. I think we could all benefit from living a bit more like Leonard Cohen." I'd love to tell my freshman year self to go to a tea and to hear the late Reverend Gomes speak, but I can't. What I can do is tell our present selves that we should do now, not eventually, what we want to do. So many of us have that book we will eventually write, that nonprofit we will eventually start, that community we will eventually give back to. If Harvard has taught us anything, it is that although structure can be comforting, finding oneself sitting at a bar in a Polynesian restaurant in Miami Beach with no idea what you're doing there can also be comforting, is that we should perhaps limit our eventuallys. As we go out into the world, I hope that we might turn our somedays into todays and our eventuallys into nows. That's where my speech was supposed to end, but the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt about that ending. I can't spout wisdom or provide perspective. I'm the same age as all of you, and I'm just as nervous and uncertain about the world as you are. The Lampoon writer in me would much rather keep it light and tell jokes about President Faust's Anne Hathaway haircut, Greg Mankiw's God complex, or the fact that none of us actually go to class than seriously reflect. And although I just urged us to avoid comfortable 2-year programs, as Everton said, I soon start working in investment banking, and I just got into an HBS program literally called 2+2. Maybe that completely invalidates my message and makes me a hypocrite, but maybe not. One thing I've learned at Harvard is to be wary of absolutes. Yes, at some point, instead of deciding what to do for the next 2 years, we'll be deciding what to do with our lives. But that point doesn't have to be today. Still, whenever that point is, I hope it is sooner rather than later. And whatever that thing is that we're each going to do with the rest of our lives, I hope so much that for each of us, it is something that makes us happy, gives us purpose, excites us, and does good. Thank you.